So what is your experience with anime?
Very little.
Well, that's our show. All right. See y'all next time. This is I Have No Title and I Must Podcast, the show where we discuss any and all aspects of pop culture. We are your hosts, Tyler
and Chris.
And before we get into today's episode, be sure to like and subscribe. It's a few seconds of your time and helps us out a lot. So today's premise is essentially anime veteran talks with an anime noob and see how that goes. So you said very little. Is that like none or?
I've read Death Note and I've seen multiple live action adaptations of it. The Japanese one, people have mixed feelings about it. I felt it was actually pretty good and was a decent truncated version of that. The American version we will save to talk about on a later date. But that's kind of it. I've seen some of the cartoon, the actual anime. For me, I'm like, I feel like it's almost a misnomer because I feel like this isn't secret knowledge anymore, but a lot of every animation is sent overseas to be animated. So like almost every cartoon that we perceive as even American is actually, in my like headcanon, also anime. But I know that I digress.
Well, I think a lot of those studios are Chinese and Korean, so I don't think that counts either.
So this is strictly Japanese in origin is what we'll be talking about.
Death Note, it's not a bad one to get into. Although, try not to spoil anything. First half of the anime, definitely a lot better than last half of it. I've not read the source material, so I don't know how that goes. But there's like a pretty substantial change about halfway through that.
I think because that's when in the books the story gets crazy complicated and they introduce like crime syndicates and a lot of new characters.
Yeah,
so
it just changes the dynamic that I don't think is as strong in the second half as it is the first half, but not a bad one to get into. So like, what was some of your reasonings for like not exploring further?
And that's the thing is I had some friends that got into Dragon Ball. There's a woman at work that I swear to God every day says, you need to watch Naruto. And I'm like, isn't it like crazy long? And she says, yes, but you don't have to watch every episode. You could just watch like the key episodes or whatever.
Yeah.
So it was just I just never got into it. I think with the craze kind of passed me by, or I wasn't exposed to it. It wasn't like I purposefully avoided it. Death Note specifically, me and this guy were talking. He had the box set of books. It comes in like a giant box and it's got an extra book that has all the rules in it, all the death god
Shinigami.
Yeah, the Shinigami like rules. I think there's 50. I can't remember. That was back in like 2012, and he was like, let's go over to my house, and then he just put this box in my arms and was like, go read this. And I was like, well, I guess I have to now. So that was kind of inflicted on me, but it was a work of genius. That guy, it's really amazing. Anybody who doesn't know what Death Note is, and if you're not into anime, this is the one I would recommend. It's a really great gateway.
I think that's what a lot of people's assumptions are, because I mean Dragon Ball Z and stuff is kind of where I started, because when me and my brother were younger, that's what would be on after we got home from school on
now
Toonami.
What channel? What
on Cartoon Network?
Really?
Yeah, between like 4 and 6 or something like that.
AM?
Originally, it was in the evening on the weekdays. They had like
That's
Toonami.
Crazy. See, I do not remember. Maybe that was just after I wasn't really watching or wasn't watching it around that time.
Because they would have something like Dragon Ball Z, a couple other anime around the time. They would like switch in and out the different Gundams. And so that was kind of my start. And then me and him just kind of picked it up from there. And he probably knows more than I do still.
Yeah.
But I think anime is a lot more accessible than people think, because a lot of the anime that gets talked about is a very specific type, and that is a very specific target, and it's what they call like shonen anime, and it's like meant for like teenage boys. And so you got a lot of like big energy, big hitting characters and stuff like that. And the anime is even more harder to get into sometimes, because they will start making the anime alongside the comic books, but they will quickly outpace their source material. And so that's where you get a lot of filler episodes, and that's what they were talking about, of only watching the key episodes.
Yeah.
So like you'll have like a couple episodes with like side characters or something that doesn't make sense, and it's because they're trying to fill a slot until the source material catches up.
Like when Steven Universe created like a whole civilization of sentient watermelons. If you think I'm making that up, you haven't watched the show. And if you're mad right now, you have watched the show. Proceed.
But whereas here, we kind of see animation as either little kids or you got like the sitcom style animation for adults. But with Japan, it kind of just runs the gamut. It's just another medium for them. And I think that's where I kind of get my intrigue. It's not that it's better or worse, it's just a different perspective.
Yeah, I mean, it's a completely different culture that I think a lot of Americans, it might seem impenetrable.
Yeah, because some things you do have a high barrier for entry, like One Piece. Like, it's been popular since its release. I don't remember exactly when they started with the comics, but it was sometime in the mid-90s, and they just recently finished with the comic run. Or the anime series started in 99 and is still ongoing. So there's like thousands of episodes. And there's some that's even longer, like been going since like the 70s or 80s. So if you didn't start watching as a kid, like, you would never catch up. But there's others, they tell their story and they end and that's it. And so that's another thing where it's just like, oh, this is really popular, let's run it to the ground. They're like, no, you got these 20 episodes, that's the story I wanted to tell, and that's it. So one of those would be Cowboy Bebop. I would recommend that to anybody. Very short, you could finish it in a weekend if you binged it. If you watched one episode a night, you could finish it in a month.
There was recently a live adaptation, wasn't there?
Yeah,
on Netflix?
Yeah, it was canceled pretty quick.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh.
But we'll forget about that.
Okay, you brought it up.
But the original anime itself, this was kind of a rarity in anime because normally you have like a comic book, then they make an adaptation of it. This was the other way around. They had the show first and then they made a comic book about it. But story's great, characters are great. Like, if you're like a big fan of jazz,
Yeah,
like,
I heard this back in the 90s. There was a small portion of a segment on Conan O'Brien. This guy talked about the jazz on Cowboy Bebop.
yeah. Even if you're not a fan of blues and jazz, this show will make you a fan of blues and jazz because the soundtrack is fantastic. Opening theme song, Tank, never skip it. And the ending theme song is a little sad, but it's really good. So yeah, I definitely recommend that to anyone. Kind of like a modern space western, but not so outlandish that you can't get invested.
So let's stop for a second, and can you explain what a manga is versus what anybody might think it is? Because you're saying comic book a lot, and I think the best one-to-one might be graphic novel, if people know what a graphic novel is. But also, I also want to say a lot of for anybody who's avoiding reading these because you have to read them in reverse, you have to turn the book what you would think, and they usually have a thing at the front of how we would normally open them in the West and American culture. English speaking, we'd open the book, hold it with the spine touching your left hand, and you'd open the book and there will be a page there that will say, "You are reading this in the wrong direction. Turn it over and start from here," and then you'll turn it over and it'll say the beginning, and then it will have a diagram that will show you how to properly follow, like a zigzag formation to follow, which I sometimes it's confusing. I think even in American comic books, or somebody puts a weird panel in there somewhere and I read it in the wrong spot. But it wasn't, I gotta say, once you settle in and get used to it, it's not as confusing as it might sound. So manga.
Well, the reason I still say comic book is because it still kind of is, but the versions we get are closer to what we would consider a trade paperback. You got several issues compiled into one comic book. And because I don't know if they're all released this way, but I know some of them are. Like how we get stories like once a month from the comic lines, they'll a lot of times have a bunch of shorter segments that they compile into like a magazine and release weekly. So when we get the books, it's just several of those weekly issues compiled into one, whereas there'd be like 3 or 4 different stories, or not stories, but like different comics in one magazine with their publishing run. Because I know like one of the bigger ones is Shonen Jump. And that's where you get like your Naruto's and like Dragon Ball Z and all that. That's where they started and they carried over. So I know some of them are like that. I don't know if all of them are. I just know some like the bigger shonen titles are. And as far as them being like in reverse, I'm trying to remember. I asked a friend once and he explained it to me. I don't know if he's correct. I never went back and checked him. But I think it's two-part. One, just the way the Japanese writing is. It's you read it in one direction than the other. And then as far as how they translate it here, they take like just the image and it's like reversed so that when they write it out for the English translation of how we would read, it would read correctly. And so the images are mirrored and then compiled. And that's why they're backwards. Or at least that's what he said. I assume he's correct. It makes sense. So yeah, it's essentially just the comic book, and the anime is just Japanese word for animation.
All right. So don't be afraid to pick up one of those weird books in that section where you see the guy that's wearing a helmet. I hope it's a helmet that has a chainsaw sticking out the front. He's scary looking, but he's probably friendlier than you think. He's probably more scared of you than you are of him.
I've not read that one yet, but I don't think it's a helmet. I think he transforms and those burst from his body.
They've gone too far.
Correct me if I'm wrong for anyone who's read Chainsaw Man.
Or that girl whose eye spirals back into her head, creating some portal into infinity. I don't know what I'm talking about.
That's Juni Ito. He's the writer.
Oh, okay.
The writer. Yeah. I think he's still mostly in the manga realms, and his would be more graphic novels. He writes.
I'd say graphic.
Yeah. I think they're starting to adapt his now into anime, or at least live action, but that's another topic. But yeah, like I said, like a lot of the big ones you see are like the shonen, and again, that's target demographic teenage boys, but it runs the gamut. You got shonen, which is for teenage boys, and you got shoujo, which is your teenage girls, and then it branches out from there, and I don't know them all. But another one to get into, I think it is longer than Cowboy Bebop, but it does have like a definite end. But Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, fantastic story. And that's another thing too with like a lot of their comics adaptations. Or here, our comics, we have a whole team. You got one person that writes it, one person that draws it, inks it, then you got a color, then you got another person that letters. It's usually one person doing everything on their comics there. So the original story for Full Metal Alchemist was like written by one girl. And again, this is one of those where they released the anime with the original comic. So there's actually two different Full Metal Alchemist anime out. One that was released at the same time as the comic, but instead of having filler episodes like a lot of them do, they branched off and made the story up as they went. So it's good, but not faithful. So after that ended, and they finally ended the run of the manga, they recreated it as Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, which is a faithful adaptation of the comic book, and I think one of the best stories there is to get into, because you got a little bit of something for everybody. Like I said, solid story, solid characters. They got a lot of stuff that gets you invested in the characters. There's that one episode that for anyone that's not seen it, they have no idea what I'm talking about. Everyone that has seen it, you don't even have to say what it is. You say that one episode.
You're a Full Metal Alchemist?
Yes. They all know. They all know what episode you're talking about.
Does it go hard?
Too hard.
Whoa. Does it have to do with the younger brother?
No.
Oh, okay.
No. Kind of a mad scientist who's trying to reclaim his former glory and goes too far.
So this is really topical specifically for this week, and I don't think we did not plan this in I mean, we did plan it. This is something we talked about a few months back. That was a topic that would be on the docket eventually, and we just happened to land on it this week because it was probably going to be one of the easiest to prepare, because you already know what you're talking about and I didn't have to talk about anything. But just last week, the highly anticipated live action adaptation from the studio that created Avatar: The Last Airbender dropped, which, how do you feel that stands? Is that anime? It feels like anime because it's like Asian culture, but there was never an Asian, there's no original version to dub, right? Like it was always English spoken. The original actors were always English. I felt like that one kind of trod this line of being in both worlds.
Yeah, and I think this is where a lot of the anime inspiration inspiration comes from, or like where it's bleeding over into our stuff, and why I think more people should also pay attention to anime, because Avatar, technically a lot of times gets lumped in with anime, but it's technically not because it was American made.
Right.
But the creators did take great strides to make sure that the things they were representing were accurate. So I think they actually went to China, spoke with different people, and gathered all this information before creating this. And it's definitely anime inspired, but like it doesn't stop there. Like if you want to go more, Christopher Nolan, like a lot of his stuff, if you go watch some of these anime movies and then come back and watch his stuff, direct inspiration.
Like Akira or something?
Well, Akira has inspired a lot of people, like that motorcycle drift.
Yeah.
It's in so many things. But I'm talking specifically Paprika. Like if you watch Inception, that hallway scene, then you go watch Paprika, like that's almost a live action adaptation of a scene in that movie, adapted for Nolan's storyline. And Aronofsky, like you see it in several of his movies. Black Swan has, again, different movie, but same creator. Satoshi Kon, who created Paprika, also did Perfect Blue. If you watch that movie and then go watch Black Swan, a lot of inspiration taken from that. Same way with a lot of Tarantino's movies, like the over-the-top violence, directly anime inspired. To the point that even in Kill Bill, one scene was animated in an anime style. So again, like I said, just different way of looking at things, different perspectives, borrowing from each other and bringing it in.
So what about, okay, this will be a part where maybe you can cut or edit or something because I need to gather my thoughts. Okay, so you wouldn't necessarily consider Avatar to be anime, like maybe some gray area, because as I'm watching, I've seen every episode of Avatar, and there's a reason why I didn't mention it at the top. Like, that's what I, because I didn't want to sound stupid. Like, I watched Avatar. And then everybody who's listening would be like, that's not anime, dumbass. I know. But I do feel that it resides in this demilitarized neutral zone because it has so many elements of anime. Like just a lot of the visual style, a lot of how the characters react, not just like the basic drawing, but where it would go into kind of like a chibi kind of thing. I don't know how to describe that. If you're a fan of anime, you'll
kind
know.
of got that cutesy.
Yeah, and like how like some of the emotion, like if it's a funny or lighthearted thing, sometimes something will have like a giant tear will be on the side of the person's head to denote either sweat or I'm not 100% sure what goes on in this. There's a lot I'm inferring, but it's extreme, almost caricature-like reactions that you wouldn't necessarily get in, say, the upcoming X-Men 97 sequel to the original X-Men, the animated series. Everything is they try to make it as realistic as it can be for this science fiction universe. People's faces emote in as realistic a way. When Rogue is laying down in front of Apocalypse, everything is pitch perfect and real. Like you feel like you could just reach out and grab Apocalypse.
Very easy to follow the plot.
Yeah, I when I was watching that episode, I followed that plot all day long. So when I'm watching Avatar, and I did just some research on it afterward, and I was like, so is this anime? But I didn't really have anybody to discuss that with, nor did I have a reason to philosophize about that.
This is one of those, like, it's not anime on technicality.
Yeah. I feel like that's the case. And it's like so few people, well, and then there's like Teen Titans Go, or even the original Teen Titans had elements of that too.
Very heavily inspired by anime at the time.
Yeah, because they would go into like, there would be musical sequences which were kind of missing in a lot of animation at the time. It wasn't really popular to have like an action superhero cartoon that broke down into song regularly. And then they would they would lean into the chibis so much so that when they ended the show and brought it back, just chibis, or kind of a little kid version of the show, like Muppet Babies I don't know. I mean, I don't know how that's as popular as it is with everyone hating it, but it still remains super. So there's people are either lying about how they feel about it and they continue to watch Teen Titans Go, or it's they're hate watching it. But just bring back regular Teen Titans anyway. That's a separate topic. Anime has clearly been extremely influential, not only in live action but into our modern cartoon style. It's when you look at especially where things have gone with, say, I want to say regular show, Adventure Time, Steven Universe especially, I think.
Yeah, definitely anime inspired with all those.
Yeah, Steven Universe especially because it's these chimera amalgamations of the different characters, kind of like when you can merge like a Digimon or Pokemon, it's kind of like evolutions, even though it's just different people merging to create a new character with different powers or abilities or whatever. Also, a lot of the characters are like different sizes. They go really big, like as big as a building sometimes, which has always been, I think, steeped in, I think it must go back to Godzilla and in the psyche of the Japanese culture, a threat that would be larger than anything you can fathom. And so there would, we're not just going to have like a Johnny Five robot. There's going to be a robot that's as big as a skyscraper and you get inside of it. Or there's going to be a giant lion and they'll form a giant man. And Digimon does this a lot. I don't know about Steven Universe, that's Gundam, obviously, as I was referring to Gundam with the giant robots or any kind of mech. I know there's probably dozens of different mech shows.
I don't know if it's the first, but like one of the first anime was Giant Robot, Gigantor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, and Ultraman, which it's a live action thing, but it's the same premise, and Power Rangers.
Yeah. Little fun fact, Ultraman was created by the guy that did the special effects for the first Godzilla movie.
Huh.
That's why they are very similar.
And it goes out like that, and everything influences, on down the line. Power Rangers, I think the story behind that was, they had, which I've never seen an intact version of a Japanese episode of that, but they were totally like different because we took the fight scenes from those, right? And then like they just made like they cast new actors.
Yeah.
And then they would just shoot the scenes that would take place at the diner or school or whatever, and just have the American actors do that, and they just cut all of the other stuff. That's what I was told when I was a kid, and I think that's actually the case, which now it's completely, we have our own American versions that are just solely American versions. I think there's been a few movies or something. I don't keep track of this. It's one of those things that was like, I was embarrassed to be watching. It was on after school, and I was getting a bit older for something like that, so I just didn't tell anybody that I was leaving it on TV and watching that. And then I found out that a couple of my friends were also watching it, and we were like, we can't tell anyone about this. So it was our secret pact. And sadly, I can't remember the name of the kid, or I would totally say his name right now. I can think of his face. He was a really funny guy. But anyway.
Talking about like things bleeding over and inspiring other things, it reminds me, it's actually like the opposite. We're like a lot of our stuff starting to be influenced by anime. Some anime influenced by our stuff. I mentioned One Piece earlier. Mm-hmm. If you look at any of the characters from that, they run the gamut of size, shape, weird looking, normal looking, and just, if you don't know, you're just like, what the is this?
And One Piece is the pirate one, right?
Yes.
Okay.
But it's just like, what is going on with these characters? Why do they look so weird all the time? And that's because the creator was inspired by Nightmare Before Christmas and all the different looking characters in there. So he made all of his characters different sizes, shapes, looks, and so on.
Huh. Interesting. Yeah. And he made the main character, like, he's not shaped like Jack Skellington, but he has like stretchy powers, right?
Yeah.
So I have a feeling that had to be an influence or some sort of subtle nod to that. That's the one thing I know about that. Yeah. He has like basically almost like Mr. Fantastic. Maybe not, maybe just arms and legs.
Well, at the start of it, it's pretty much Mr. Fantastic, and it gets crazy on down the line.
Okay. All right.
That's one of those I'm 1,000 episodes in.
God, when do we get to talk about Transformers?
Transformers, I think they have a Japanese version, but also started out American.
Right. So it was it was based on a Japanese toy line. So
Yeah.
I can't.
GoBots.
No, like the actual Transformers, and that's why there's two different sizes. Like often, if the original Generation 1, because it was a few different toy lines that were like different things. Like some were just tried to be 1-to-1 adaptations of vehicles or what, not 1-to-1, but like whatever scale, like 1/64th or something, or even smaller than that. And so that's why like Bumblebee's original car is like not in scale with Optimus Prime or whatever, even though they're both main characters. And also the original Ironhide did not have a head. Yeah, the action figure didn't have it. Like when you transform the van, he doesn't have a head because it was from a different line that was meant to be played as like there was a little man that would come with it, and it was like a Gundam type thing. He would be inside controlling the van as a robot, so it didn't need a head as the guy was inside. And I think you would even see him because of the paneling, like the windshield would be clear. So they paid more attention to getting the vehicles to look right as vehicles, and so their playability as robots, they had very limited articulation, which they've solved now. You can have like they look amazing now, can transform well. They're a little delicate sometimes, but they can have some really great articulation, can almost look just like the original Transformers and also still look like the car. Now some of them they kind of skimp on that and make them look cartoonish or whatever, but so yeah, they started Americans needed toys, and what better way to sell toys than cartoons in the 80s? Thundercats, Silverhawks, G.I. Joe, Transformers, one of the big ones. He-Man, a really big one, and He-Man has a pretty interesting story in itself. I think it has its own documentary too. So and good luck getting a Generation 1 Megatron. Also, there were like I want to say 4, but there could have been 5 different types of guns. Like there wasn't, Megatron was the one that ended up in the show as a character. And yes, there was Shockwave, which was like the futuristic, he stayed on Cybertron. He was like the futuristic purple and gray or purple and lavender gun that made noises. But there were actually, I think it was from Takara. There was like the kind of gun that, because he's a Walter P-38, I think. There was the kind of gun that like James Bond uses. I don't know guns, so I don't know their names. People are gonna be screaming at their headphones or whatever. This is an important thing. And there was like I think 2 revolver type guns, which were a fair bit bigger, and they all transformed I think about the same. I do not own any of these. These are the only guns that I really want in my collection. I know the purge is coming. I'll get something real then. By that time I can just break into a pawn shop and have my pick of the litter. Anyway, so yes, Transformers, another gray area thing, even though it looks very American, but because it was. Having said that, it stems from Japanese culture, being based on toys that were made there for kids. Some of them even like that were meant to be real. You know, like there was like a little watch. I had a digital watch, and he transforms into a man, a little robot thing, and the reflector being the 3 guys that turn into a camera. I'm pretty sure one version, I don't know if it was actually Soundwave or a different version that would actually be like an AM FM radio that could pick up things, which can be extremely small. So
bringing up like Transformers and that gray area and stuff, there's actually a lot of shows from like the 80s and 70s and stuff. People don't realize this is actually anime because they took the animation and heavily Americanized it. So like Voltron, apparently that's not even the original story of what's going on.
Yeah, they can completely like alter. Yes.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I think like Gigantor was like that too, because it was like real popular at the time, but this was made like right after World War II. So you still had a lot of Imperial sympathizers. And so it was like heavily like anti-war in America. But we took it and adapted it, made it into heavily Americanized in the opposite of what its original intent was. And I think we did that with like Astro Boy as well and a bunch of other stuff. And another one that I think is really funny is there's an anime, I don't know what its original name is, but here in America it's called Samurai Pizza Cats. And apparently in Japan it bombed so hard. So they're just like, here, you guys take it. we don't want it. But they didn't send a script. They just sent the animation. So the writers had to watch this soundless animation and write their own story, and it became a hit over here.
Huh.
Yeah.
Just some weird, surreal, whatever they could come up with.
Pretty much.
That would be that would actually be an excellent artistic exercise to do.
Yeah.
Mystery Science Theater 3000, but for money.
Yeah.
They do that for free, I think.
Yeah. The original.
No, I'm around with.
I was gonna say the original was on public broadcast.
Was it really?
Yeah.
I was kidding. But
yeah, that's why he used these crappy movies. It's because
those the ones that he could get for royalty free or whatever.
Yeah. So there for a while it was just public broadcast, and it was only on a handful of channels.
I thought he was just daring people like Ed Wood to come out of obscurity and sue him. I bring it. What's gonna happen?
It's more like, I don't have any money. I want to do a TV show. These are basically free.
Yeah.
But that also kind of brings up the debate that a lot of people have as subbed versus dubbed for when you watch anime. And I know a lot of people will fight me on this, but I usually always go dubbed just because I have a hard time reading and following the action.
Yeah, so a lot of these are action driven.
Yeah, I either miss the action or I miss the dialogue.
Yeah.
So dubbed is my personal. I know it's not always accurately translated, but it gets me close enough.
I've seen Pan's Labyrinth is one of my favorite films. I haven't seen it in several years now. I need to watch it again. But that's one that I don't know that a dubbed version exists. I'm sure it has to somewhere, but I've never watched it in English. And I'd like to, just so that I can let my mind go and just watch the film. Because Guillermo del Toro is such an amazing director. His cinematography is perfect. There's so much to look at in that movie.
Yeah.
It's so much, it's so detail oriented. Every movie of his is so detail oriented, but that one especially. And so I haven't looked into that, and I would like to do that. I've seen it. I saw it in the theater in Spanish, and I don't speak Spanish, so I wouldn't be absorbing all of it in the original language anyway. I'm just reading the approximation of what they're saying. So anyway, I get what you're saying. I don't disagree with you. It's the best, unless you want to learn every language in the world. It's the best, and also we're busy. Sometimes we can't be completely absorbed in laser beam focused on a thing to read something. If you have something, there's a lot of shows I listen to, like a radio show, or at least parts of it, certain sitcoms, especially if I go back and I'm watching it or listening to it for the second time. If I go back and I just want to put on something that's familiar, and we all know that's a soothing mechanism for the human psyche to listen to something familiar that's comforting to you. So you put on Community. It's an episode or there's maybe a filler episode it skips to. You can be cleaning up around the house and have your headphones on.
I think the argument could be made a little bit more for older anime, or at least that's not gone back and been redubbed. Mm-hmm. Because back then it wasn't as popular as it is now, so they're just screw it, whatever, we'll throw it out there. So a lot of times it didn't match up. That's why you get that choppy kind of weird talk in Speed Racer. That they're famous for. Because it's just their mouth is moving this fast, we don't care, let's throw that out there.
Yeah.
But I think nowadays it's taken a little bit more serious. There's more professionalism behind the acting and translating, so more accessible. But I think another barrier to entry with anime that kind of turns a lot of people off is there's a lot of tropes, again, crossing those cultural boundaries that sometimes a little embarrassing if someone walks in on you watching that. It's just no, I'm watching porn. Yeah, that's the less embarrassing thing to be caught doing right now. Again, that's not every anime. I know that's the one that gets a lot of attention, I should say, just because a lot of those do tend to be more popular because they're marketed for a different type of audience. But anime runs the gamut of age ranges and genres. So honestly, I think if anyone's willing to give it a try, there's something for everybody.
So you want to do top recommendations for different age ranges? Something, because you don't want to. I wouldn't necessarily recommend Death Note to kids.
No.
So if you're out there and you're an adult and you want to watch Death Note, I would say definitely that the book, whatever, don't watch that American movie unless it's for, at least if you've absorbed everything else Death Note and you have to be completionist about it and you want to watch it just because Lakeith Stanfield's in it. Lakeith Stanfield is actually great. I think he suffered from, it's a weird script and it diverges a lot from the book, so it's the loosest of adaptations. They American the out of that. So anyway, the Japanese film adaptations I don't think are bad, and Ryuk looks great and like better than he should. But if somebody has kids and they think, well, I want to watch something, but my kids are going to want to watch it if they see me watch. I have little kids, they're going to see me watching a cartoon, they're going to want to watch it too. What would you recommend?
Most of the Studio Ghibli movies.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I think that is a...
Wait, those were going to be on the list? I've watched a bunch of those.
Yeah.
Why didn't we talk about that? That we could have just titled this Studio Ghibli Review USA #1, and we would have gotten like a lot more views. Oh well, maybe they'll be next.
Yeah, well, I think I'll mention it here, and then we'll do a specific Studio Ghibli, because I could talk Studio Ghibli. Like, those are my comfort movies. I'm having a bad day. I really need to pick me up. I throw on a Ghibli movie. And with Max, that has been made very accessible. But yeah,
So
I think...
name two of those.
Two of them?
Yeah.
Like, for kids or for like anybody?
Kids.
Spirited Away.
Okay.
If you got really little kids, I would go My Neighbor Totoro.
Mm-hmm. Oh, there is that one scene, though.
Yeah.
And you know the scene.
Well, it's still better than Grave of the Fireflies. That will break your heart. I don't care how old or young you are. But
Okay.
Howl's Moving Castle, maybe not quite little kiddish, but I don't think it would be so out far that they couldn't watch it.
What about Kiki?
Yeah, Kiki's Delivery Service is a good one too.
Okay.
If you're a little bit older kids, I would go Princess Mononoke.
Okay.
It's my personal favorite. Also, little kids, maybe Earwig, though that one is a weird one.
I haven't seen that one.
That one's a weird one for Ghibli, because that is the first and only time they have deviated from their hand-drawn animations.
Oh, is it CGI?
Yeah.
Oh.
So that one's not bad. It's not good. It's not bad. It's all right. I've not watched the new one, but I think this is the first time that they've actually gotten like major overseas awards for it. And that's even with all the accolades that Spirited Away got when it came out. But yeah, I would recommend those for pretty much anybody, especially if you got younger kids. Some of them drift into the PG-13, so I would probably still, if I had kids, let them watch it, but I was also allowed to watch things that I probably shouldn't have been allowed to watch when I was a kid, so
But they're rated, so if you're on the fence about it, you can
Yeah.
look at the rating, and that'll help you decide. So what about teenagers' TV shows?
Well, again, that kind of depends on like your maturity levels and how much patience you have. But again, Cowboy Bebop, I'd recommend to anybody. Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, I would recommend to almost anybody. Again, maybe not little kids, just because I don't think they would grasp everything going on. And there's that one episode. But if you kind of got that immature kind of teenage boy thing going on, then Dragon Ball Z, Dragon Ball. Although a little bit of a divide there, because the original Dragon Ball is much more influenced by Journey to the West from China, and is more of a adventure, whereas Dragon Ball Z is more about the punching stuff. And then Naruto, One Piece, if you kind of got the patience to go through that, there's a lot of episodes. But yeah. Adults,
Yes. Hard R.
Ghost in the Shell. I think the movie's more harder R than the series, but especially if you like that kind of cyberpunk kind of feel to it, I'd really recommend those.
Akira?
Yeah, Akira, I think when I first watched it, I wasn't in a place to accept it, or like, not accept it, appreciate it.
Yeah.
But looking back on it now, like, yeah, I would watch that just for the, I want to say like technical input, because this came out in the 80s, but the attention to detail and everything put into this, like story, visuals, everything, you'd be hard pressed to get anyone to front the money to do that now. So yeah, I would recommend that just for its like historical significance to pretty much everything that came after it. Because again, that one motorcycle scene where he kind of slides in on the side there, been replicated in so many things. So yeah, I'd definitely recommend going and watching that and just explore. Like I said, something for everybody. You just want something real casual, something there's like just slice of life things. It's just people hanging out day to day, feel good. Also, if you want to explore something a little bit more heavier subject matter, I would pick several of the Gundams. they're all some sort of like anti-war, but with war as the background somewhere in there. So there's a lot to explore there. Just the different series focus on like different aspects and playing around with stuff.
You can't really make an anti-war film without it being set in the middle of war.
Yeah.
I feel like that's, if you do, it's got to be a very compelling story. But
I think at least the only one that I can think of offhand that isn't set directly in some kind of war or war adjacent is probably G Gundam. And the premise of that is they've decided to, instead of going to war and fighting all the time, every so many years, they will have a tournament and they'll send representatives from each country or nationality or nation or space colonies to come in and fight with their mobile suits. And the winner of that, their nation, will be essentially the leaders of Earth until the next go around. So that's kind of an anti-war, as in we're just going to compete like this instead of outright fight for power. So it's more thought out war, I guess. But
how do you feel about that?
Personally, I really like the Gundams. I also, talking about like Ghibli being like my comfort movie thing, putting together Gundam models is like my mental relaxation. You just got all the parts out, you look at it, you put them together, then you got something cool to set on your shelf afterwards.
Yeah, I've seen you have so you built all those. Mm-hmm. Those aren't like, you didn't buy them. Like,
no, they're all kits.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever commented on them when I've been in your basement. I've seen that. It's actually pretty cool.
Yeah, it's my mental unwinding.
I only do mental unraveling. So, especially these days. So, how do you feel about the show? This show. The one we're on right now.
Well, I think it's pretty awesome. I think everyone should like and subscribe.
I think so too. Just like it and leave a comment down below. Something along the lines of, wow, these guys seem pretty even keel. Are these even the same guys who have opinions about Star Wars? That's crazy. Do they like Star Wars for the right reasons? We do, because, some of it's good and some of it's bad. Yeah. That's the way anything is. So what do you think? What do you think we should talk about next?
I don't know. I thought about that. I think we should start having like a hat with ideas, and we'll just pull something out of the hat, and we'll tell everybody at the end of the episode what that is.
And then have to prepare for the next one. I think the music one went really well. There's a lot that we could, that's infinite.
Yeah.
Doing a standard series on that. What was the other one that you'd pitched?
I actually got the idea from something you said in the music episode, which was separating the art from the artist.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Do you mean a philosophical debate? That in general?
Yeah.
So everything's on the table?
Yeah.
All right. I'm going to write Bill Cosby's name down and slide it across the table to you. And you will have to take that. You could probably sabotage me and write Pete Davidson, and then I would be like, he's not so bad. He just does drugs. I don't think he's like Bill Cosby to anybody. So good luck with that. And what that would be, you guys let us know. How long would you hang out in that philosophical debate about separating the art from the artist? When you said that in the text, I thought I'd missed something. I thought there was something more specific there, and I had forgotten. Of course, that's something that's always going to come up when I talk about any kind of art at some point. Because you're going to run into somebody like historically who is either like not a good person, but, and I think there's a level which will ignore that if the art's good enough, and how long ago it was. So it's like, did it turn out that Pablo Picasso had like bodies hidden under his, the flooring in his back room? No one would care now. It would just be another footnote in history. No one, people would be like, did you know Pablo Picasso murdered people? Whoa, I didn't even know that. And then you would move on with your life.
Be like, wow, I want to go see those paintings now.
Yeah.
So this is the murderer's painting? That's pretty cool.
And for that, there's been people still recognize or like believe fully that Vincent van Gogh killed himself, whereas there's substantial evidence that he did not kill himself, but it doesn't work its way into the modern consciousness. So that just becomes part of his lore, and the mythology is more important. So guys, let us know if there's a topic that you think we should be talking about, like Star Wars. Just type that down in there. And if there's something within this episode you'd like us to explore more, or just want to talk, just let us know, because we're here for you.
Though I think we will hold off on Star Wars, because I got something big planned for Star Wars month, a couple months away still, but buckle up.
I would actually, at this point, considering the what happened on the last debacle level of Star Wars conversation. I'd be okay if I never had to talk about Star Wars again until Andor season 2 comes out. And I do a whole episode on Andor. I love that so much. I think, anyway. So, guys, just click like. Wait, who's still listening at this point? Sarah, just click like.
The 6 people that's already clicked like.
Don't click it again. It unclicks it. Click it 3 times.
But I think that's a good place to wrap up. I hope everyone enjoyed today's episode and the potential sneak peek on what's to come. Let us know in the comments, what your favorite anime is. What would you recommend? Are you not an anime fan that, found this interesting? Let us know about that too. As we said, like, subscribe, comment, tell your friends, share the video. Helps us out tremendously. And until next time, we'll see you.
See you.